Welcome to The Bold Book of the Day with Dr. Denise Nicholson, a show that is a central hub and safe space for authors to share their stories. The Bold Book with Dr. Denise begins now.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to Bold Book of the Day. My name is Dr. Denise Nicholson, and this podcast is for anyone looking for inspiration. Guess who we have in this audience today? Well, as my guest, none other than Rabbi Pinchas Taylor, and he wrote two books, Pillars of Faith and A Jewish Guide to the Mysterious. Now, welcome, Mr. Taylor.
Thanks so much for having me.
Now, I know you are an author and you wrote this brilliant book about the pillars of faith. Tell me, what was so important? Why did you want to write this book about your pillars of faith?
So I think that there are many people around from multiple faiths that when their religious training or their exploration of God is something that a lot of times are imposed by their parents in childhood. So like in the Jewish community, that's Hebrew school that you go to and until you're bar or bat mitzvah. Friends of mine, when I was growing up, they would go to catechism, and they would also be learning the basics to get through their first communion and then their confirmation. And various faiths have their programs for children in order to sort of get the basics of what the faith is all about. But what I've found is that a lot of people in their adult years have a very limited understanding of what their faith is all about, or what healthy faith in general is about. Why does it make sense to believe in God? Why should I have faith in my life? And when we're adults, the meaning of faith is much more real and much more relevant than when we're children. When you're a child, all your needs are provided for you. In a good situation, your parents are involved in your life. I mean, like it's not, doesn't seem as clear and relevant. When you're an adult, though, many people start exploring and want to have a good understanding of faith and why it makes sense to believe in God, a higher power. And the book explores that for an adult mind. And even if a person is not at the point where they want to necessarily be a more religious person in their daily practice, at least it gives sort of an explanation as to why it makes sense to be a religiously oriented person.
So when you were, I understand that when you are, growing up, you have the foundation already set, and you want to adhere to what your parents or what your culture is, or so how do you find your own self when you are trying to please your parents, trying to learn your tradition, and trying to learn the faith?
So I would encourage people to start with the faith that they grew up with, just kind of like examine that, but also to keep in the back burner to not be satisfied with the way in which you grew up, and be prepared to ask questions and talk to clergy that you can have dialogue with. And if you get too many of don't ask that question, you may be on the road to finding out something that's deeper and more meaningful than you may imagine. It's those types of conversations that begin a real spiritual journey. In my own life, I grew up. I was born a Jewish person, but didn't grow up in a particularly religious household. And this was something that kind of came to me when I was a teenager, 15 years old. I decided that I wanted to be a rabbi. And through exploration of the sort of parameters of Judaism that I grew up with led to deeper exploration. And I became a much more observant person in my actual practice than I grew up as. And still obviously maintained good relationship with family members and friends. But the goal was to look at Judaism at its core, ask more questions, explore a greater spectrum, I guess, than I was exposed to as a young person, and I wound up, in a very traditional Jewish observance.
Did you convert your family?
I didn't, and that wasn't the goal. It was about my own exploration, and I was happy to answer questions along the way and explain why it is that maybe I was wanting to do certain things and why I now believe certain things. And but the goal is never to convert anyone or to persuade anyone. This is about your own. This is about your own journey, and I
Yes.
think that, like anything else, that if you really want to persuade somebody of the truth of what you believe, I think the best way to do that is just by living it and let them see, like,
Yes.
hey, I want some of that, and let nature take its course. The more you
I
push things on
absolutely
people,
agree.
yeah.
Like, finish that sentence, because I think it's really important.
Yeah, I was going to say the more you try to convert somebody, the more you try to push something on somebody, the more pushing them away. The greatest way that you have somebody to, if you want someone to follow you, is by don't insinuate that they have to follow you. just do your thing and let people observe, and whatever happens, happens.
Let
But
your
that's
life
generally, I think, the way that
impact
people come.
others. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely.
So I really love that concept, because I believe that when you want something badly for yourself, it doesn't matter who else wants this thing. You want it for yourself. And if it's your religion, or if it's a partner, if you want that for yourself because you see the good in it, then go out and live your life and include those things, so that people can see how happy and your joy and the peace in your life. And if they want that joy and that peace, then they will be attracted to it.
100%.
I
And
love
in our faith, it actually is kind of like built into the cake, because Judaism, in differentiation to many other faiths, doesn't actively seek out converts. Many faiths, they try to to missionize to people and
Yes.
make others see the way that they see it, which, again, that's their prerogative.
Mhm.
But baked into the cake of Judaism is not going out and seeking to bring more adherents in. It's just to live a positive Jewish lifestyle and be, as it says in Isaiah, a light to the nations of the world. Not
Yes.
to go convert the nations of the world, just be a shining example of how a person's supposed to live.
Yes, be the light, so that people can be attracted to the light. Because I realize in my own life that I am attracted to a certain thing. I'm attracted to a certain way of life. I'm attracted to light, to goodness, to peace, to love. And I see that when it is not a part of my community, or is not a part of the places that I am, where I put myself, then I kind of retract. But if there is a place where there's love and there's light and there's good, warm feeling of leadership, or just something that I like, that I'm drawn to, I'm attracted to it. And more people should see it this way. But we're not here to convert them. We're just going to live our light and let our light shine.
That's right, and that's the way to do it. I think in my life, I imagine that you have the same experience. Is that the more you are not interested in converting somebody, or not imposing yourself upon them, the more they are interested in what it is that you have that going on. So
Yes.
that is actually the most effective way.
So how does your book aim to bridge, well, I know you have two books, but I'm speaking of your latest book, if you don't mind, The
Sure.
Pillars of Faith.
The Jewish Guide to the Mysterious is actually the more recent one.
Oh, I'm so sorry. I'm sorry.
That's okay. That's okay.
Tell me
I'm
the
happy to
name
talk about
again.
either. The Jewish Guide to the Mysterious.
Oh, okay. Yes. I saw
Yes.
that one. So that is more recent than The Pillars of Faith?
That's more recent, yeah.
Okay, so forgive me. I thought I did my homework.
No, that's fine. That's
I was
fine.
too busy doing my homework.
It's a similar theme, just kind of
Uh-huh.
coming at it from a different angle. So
Okay.
the pillars of faith goes into faith in a very traditional sense, kind of explains from a philosophical point of view why it makes sense to believe in God, what are some of the philosophical answers to some of the paradoxes that come with religion sometimes. So like God's foreknowledge versus our free will, why bad things happen to good people, why it makes sense to believe the revelation story of Judaism, that God gave the Ten Commandments at Mount Sinai, why we believe in a Messiah and a messianic redemption in the time to come. So he goes through sort of the reasonable approach to all of the things that Jews believe. The second book, The Jewish Guide to the Mysterious, goes much more into some of the paranormal topics that a lot of people who are not religious but are sort of spiritually oriented are
Mm-hmm.
interested in. And it kind of talks about them through the lens of Jewish tradition. So things like dreams, astrology, angels, demons, ghosts, alien life, all of the sort of hot button topics, magic and mysticism, that
Mm-hmm.
people who are spiritually oriented but not necessarily religiously affiliated can kind of get like a Jewish understanding of what the ancient Hebrews had discussed when these types of issues were brought up. So it gives a unique look, even for the already religiously observant and oriented person. It explores topics that are really not mainstream, kind of off the beaten path sorts of topics that kind of bring interesting to think about. What does traditional religion think about extraterrestrial life or about dreams? Those are fun topics to discuss.
So, how do the exploration um, of the mysterious contributes to your understanding of spirituality in the modern day context?
So I think that unfortunately, I think many people in our society are very materialistic and materially oriented. And one of the things that I like to see, even if I disagree with the conclusions, I like to see that on the History Channel, for example, after 9 o'clock, there's all these like wacky paranormal sorts of shows. Chasing after ghosts, ghost hunters, ancient aliens, all of these sorts of outside the box topics. And the reason, even if I don't necessarily agree with some of the conclusions that are made, I like that aspect of life is being discussed, a spiritual aspect, that there is something beyond the material world, because so many people are so fixed, so locked into materialism, that we don't think about anything outside of the box in which we live. And I think being able to explore some of these mystical topics is helpful in just sort of reshaping people's minds that, hey, you know what? There might be more to life than my five senses attest to.
And when people are that this is my thought, when people are more open to seeing that they're more than just your five senses, they're the world is deeper and more complex than just your five senses. So when you understand that, what do you expect us to gain?
Well, I think the broadening of our minds, a connection with truth always comes with broadening of our mind, right? Because the more narrow-minded we are, we can't experience truth because we're so locked into our previous ways of thinking. But the
Mm-hmm.
more we can broaden our mind, the more likely it is that we will be on a greater, deeper quest for the truth, that we'll be more successful in uncovering a greater aspect of truth the more we broaden our minds to things. And so a person who's very much living a strictly material existence, the idea of being curious about things like these ghost hunters or extraterrestrial life or all the sorts of paranormal topics. And even the scientific exploration that has gone into a lot of these things over the past few decades, things like dreams and even reincarnation. Most people don't realize that reincarnation is something that has been delved into by college professors, by researchers, by doctors that are very much very well qualified in esteemed universities. I mean, these are real topics, and to sort of even look from a scientific lens at some of these outside the box topics gives us a broader sense of reality and enables us to have a deeper and more meaningful life.
Why is it that some people, they can dream dream something or have a dream, and then that dream plays out like it was a movie?
Yeah, I mean, there's certainly very famous precognitive dreams that a person has before they happen. I think the most famous in American history is that Abraham Lincoln had very vivid dreams about his own assassination prior to it happening.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, it's actually logged in his his partner and his security guard, his security detail, writes about early in his diaries about what went on the night of Fort Stephen. Sort of like what led up to that is this constant repetition of an assassination dream. Now, if we want to be perfectly objective in this, which I think we should be perfectly objective. We could really explain it in two ways. Either one, the most obvious, is that dreams kind of open up a doorway to give us glimpses of possible futures.
Yes.
Or he was very highly anxious president living in the most divided time in American history, where there was literally a civil war going on, and he was the seen as public enemy number one. And as most presidents have to be careful about someone trying to assassinate him, the Abraham Lincoln model of being right in the middle of the Civil War had to have been an extraordinarily stressful and anxiety building experience. And so you could just say that it was kind of playing out his worst fears in his dream. But we definitely have evidence that dreams help facilitate creativity, right? We even say that in a regular conversation. If you're having trouble making a decision, say, "Let me sleep on it," because just that will maybe help to sort of like broaden my perspective on things. Dreams give us ideas oftentimes, and it's not unlikely or out of the question that someone could dream a dream that actually does come into fruition, and that it was maybe a glimpse of the future. I'm not going to discount that. I won't necessarily be my first assumption, but I'm not opposed to that.
But it is one of the conversations that you have in a Jewish tied to the myth.
Absolutely, yeah.
Or the mystical, yes.
Yeah, the whole idea is trying to find a balance. So, like, I kind of find oftentimes in just talking to people over the years that there's really kind of two different types of people. There's like the very spiritually oriented people who like don't need any proof for anything and just kind of like, I believe, and that's it. And then there's the others that like the sea could split in front of their eyes and they'd be like, well, that's they rationalize it in some way. So the Jewish Guide to the Mysterious tries to take sort of a balanced middle of the line approach and kind of consider both angles, hopefully arising somewhere in the middle where, yes, it's good and interesting to have evidence for things. That's something that's necessary, but it's also worthwhile considering that there might be more to the experience of reality than is outside of the five senses.
So we can consider that a dream can be part of the evidence, but not the whole evidence.
Certainly. I think that dreams are valuable for people, even in a normal circumstance, that they are expressions of our waking life. and they allow us the opportunity to express things in our waking life that we may not know how or be able to express. So, for example, if during your waking life you're really mad at your boss, and you can't yell at him in your waking life, because the results of that are going to be very undesirable, right? You might get fired.
You may get
But
fired.
right, but the dream world is a perfect opportunity for those sorts of emotions to be able to express themselves without the consequences that are needed during that would be there during the waking hours. And so whether it's that sort of thing, right, as a way of emotional expression, or whether it's emotional processing of how you're feeling, sometimes tapping into feelings that you may not even be may not be aware of in your waking life. They're one of my favorite famous examples. And again, a lot of the studies on the meanings of dreams that are speculative, but it's an interesting consideration nonetheless. So, for example, there's a very famous dream. Many people have this dream of where you're in a public place, but you're not fully clothed. But you're either not dressed fully, or you're underdressed. So like you show up in your pajamas, right? Or you show up in your underwear, or and you're in a public setting. And so that has been said to mean that during your waking life, perhaps you felt like you overexposed yourself. Maybe you shared something that was a little too private that you regretted after sharing it. And so that feeling that you have of overexpression, of over revealing yourself, represents itself in the dream world as you over revealing yourself, showing parts of your body that you wouldn't ordinarily show in a public place.
So it's to take time to understand the symbols or the symbolism in your dreams.
Yeah, I'd say like the theme of the dream,
Yeah.
not necessarily like every detail and whatever, if you saw like a red car in your dream, to try to break down what the red car is about, but more like the theme. What emotions are you experiencing in the dream that is perhaps relevant to something that you've been either grappling with or not aware that you are grappling with during your waking life?
I had a very I get dreams that when I look into the dreams, they're revealing. And when I was getting married, so I lost my father when I was 3 years old, and when I was getting married, I was 21 or 22 years old, and I had a dream that I was flying into a place to see my father. And when I got to I was flying over luscious green land. And then I went over some rocky lands. And then I pitched on a prison. And I was like, all this time, this is where my father was? He was in a prison? And when I woke up, I thought of that because I know my father wasn't in a prison. And, I know he died. I went to his funeral. I saw the burial. I have no questions about that. But after this dream, I kept on questioning, what does this mean? What does this mean? And I summarized that this dream must have meant that I wanted to see my father before I walked down the aisle, or to feel that he was free. I don't know, but that's the interpretation I gave myself.
Well, one of the interesting parts of that dream that you mentioned is the aspect of flying. And so the flying is actually my favorite dream. I love the flying dream. I like hope for the flying dream each night because it's just so much fun. But it's interesting that you came to your father through flying, as opposed to wandering through a forest or or driving, or like the flying dream is actually said to be just that person is like inspired or like spiritually inclined in their waking life at that particular time. That there's some sort of like arousal of spirituality perhaps going on in their waking life that is channeled into this image of like you actually flying. Yeah. So a lot of the dream, I guess, storylines that are common amongst people tend to be expressions of very human experiences that we share, that are common amongst people. I can't necessarily speak to the details of what does it mean that you flew to your father and the father was in prison, even though that wasn't obviously the case. But the flying aspect is something, some sort of spiritual longing or spiritual arousal that perhaps was going on in your life at that particular time.
I'm going to look more into it now that I'm speaking to you, because you're stirring up this inquisitive part of me with the Jewish Guide to the Mysterious, and I think it's given me more, I guess, autonomy to dive into the mysterious, the mysteries of dreams. What else did you have to write about and offer us in this book? I know dreams is a big thing for me because I'm big into dreams, but tell me, there must be so much more.
Oh gosh, I mean, there really is. We talked about reincarnation, we talked about astrology, we talked about angels and demons and extraterrestrial life. All of like anything that you can think of that's like outside the box, that's like spirituality, but like outside of the box of the way that people tend to think of religion, particularly of the Abrahamic faiths. We address in that book as best as possible. So. Yeah, I mean, reincarnation that's a fun one. The afterlife, the soul, what the soul is all about. These are really interesting, and I think very valuable topics for people to think about. Like, you maybe haven't thought of that dream in quite some time, but through our conversation, now all of a sudden you're stirred to, hey, maybe let me explore that a little bit more. And that's the idea, is like, let's talk about some stuff that's like outside of what people are normally talking about or thinking about. Like, let's broaden that awareness of like what reality is, what life's about, what meaning is, and let's explore that together. And it usually these sorts of topics that kind of get people thinking, like, hey, I never thought about it like that before. I always kind of thought that those types of things were kind of hokey. They were just some, you believe in alien life, it's you're like a crazy drunk uncle that wears the tinfoil hat like that. But no, this is like real interesting and mostly scientifically oriented conversation that can be had on all topics.
How does modern science, with acknowledging its limitations in explaining the entirety of human experience, how does it connect with what we're talking about, like reincarnation?
So there's been quite a number of, this was surprising to me along the journey to find out just how many doctors, professors, people that are very highly credible people were exploring and mainstream. We're not talking about some fringe guy that got his doctorate from some diploma mill. We're talking about very mainstream people at mainstream universities, professors, doctors, and so forth, doing studies on people, on adults, on children, and doing it over the course of several decades. Meaning that they would study, for example, reincarnation. They would study children. Dr. Ian Stevenson, for example, out of the University of Virginia, would do a tremendous amount of studies with children, spent several decades with children that claimed that they remember, quote unquote, when they were big, right? And remember the details of their lives that are just difficult to explain or to sort of to just wave them on by. It's just kid dreaming about something, like with details about what was going on and the place and the time that the person was living. And a lot of these studies were done as well, not only with children, but in children before the internet. So it wasn't just like, well, maybe it was just some gifted child that was reading too much, Googling
too much,
TV, Googling too much, right? And so the studies are just quite interesting. Again, I'm not looking to convince anyone of the truth or falsehood of reincarnation, but it does certainly open the door to a different way of thinking about it, not just sort of dismissing it as like, wow, that's some new age kook stuff. This is like, this is like legitimate stuff. And what's I found even more interesting, and I mentioned it in the book, there are certain doctors, researchers, and whatnot, that actually they, in the beginning of their studies, they set out to sort of disprove reincarnation. They wanted to study it so that they could disprove it, and then through their exploration, they wound up becoming believers themselves. So I think that's even the most interesting, because they weren't just trying to confirm their own prior
Belief,
biases,
right?
right? They were really trying to like disprove it, and then through the exploration, I always find those stories in general, whether we're talking reincarnation or faith exploration, that those who are like really kind of dead set against it, when they come to a new understanding through their exploration, that's like very impactful, because like there's no confirmation bias over here. We're not trying to just pat ourselves on the back for knowing the answer and cherry picking the answers that we want it to hear. We go out with a real dedication to seek out a point, and I want to disprove reincarnation, then wind up coming back like can't disprove it, but I'm a believer now. So I mean that's pretty neat, and there's a whole chapter dedicated to those sorts of stories with the research that's involved. It's all heavily footnoted, so a person can even go beyond the book and read the books that are all referenced in the footnotes as well. But the whole scope is just to sort of, let's get out of the five senses, or limiting ourselves to the five senses, or the things that people are typically thinking about. What do you think about? You think of the work that you do. You go to work every day. You make your money. The things going on in your family, the things going on generally in society. People talk about politics. People talk about sports. People talk about those are, again, those I'm not against those topics, but that there might be more to life and to meaning and to living than sometimes the narrow scope that we can get locked into.
There's so many things that you said that I want to um, to continue focusing on. But one of the things that I find interesting is that the researchers were trying to disprove something, and then they end up finding more proof of it. And one of my strong beliefs in life is that if you really want something, start focusing on it. If you want to see something in your life that you've always thought about, dreamed of, just start focusing on it, because what you focus on grows.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah, there's a big idea of like, manifesting now. A lot of people are talking about manifesting, that when you think about something, you want something strong enough, and you put your mind to it, then you'll actually accomplish it. And that's I agree. I mean, that when a person has a focus on something and they want it really bad, chances are they're going to start working towards it, and the chances are they're going to get it sooner or later.
Yes.
It's going to happen. But you gotta keep plugging away on the way. There was an interesting fact that I came across fairly recently. Just found it interesting. So it was like a scientific notion, a scientific conclusion, that just by writing something down that you want to do, I think it's like 42% more likely that it'll happen. It's like, that's incredible. So like, I've been writing everything down now, and then just because got nothing to lose, right?
Listen, I
List it,
absolutely
write it.
endorse
Yeah.
that. I have these pens that I like to give away when I go to different book signings.
Okay.
And so, first of all, the pens, they have my publishing company information and website, right?
Okay.
But I like to just give the notion, or put them in the mindset, or have the idea that the pen is magical, and whatever you write down will come through. If you're not worried about it comes through faster, because you can just write it down and just go about your life And in a few years, when you go back and check, you'll see, oh my goodness, these things have come true. One of the goals that I had for myself was to become a TEDx speaker. And I remember the new year had began, and when the new year began, you get a new agenda and you write everything down. So one of my goals were to get that done in that new year. And it didn't happen in the beginning of the year, it happened at the end of the year, but I wasn't actively focusing on how to do this thing. I put it out there, and then I got a call that this opportunity was available, and I could have said no because it was halfway across the world. But I said yes because it was on my to-do list for the year. And I
Yes.
believe that just writing it down, like you said, made it 42% easier for me to get the opportunity to say yes.
Isn't that amazing? You know, if you'll if you'll indulge me, I guess you could say, we can together do a little thought experiment, because we had been talking about the TEDx talks before, and
Yes.
about the possibility of helping me to do a TEDx talk. So why don't we? You wrote down already that you're gonna try to help me. The next one that comes up for you, I'm gonna write down that's my goal for this year, and maybe a year from now we can meet up again and see that it actually came into fruition. This could be like our time capsule. I would say,
Yes.
you wrote it down, I wrote it down, and together with that power can come together, and we will we'll make it happen.
And when there are two or more that believe, what happens? There's a law. Oh my goodness.
The intensity. Yeah. Oh yeah.
It's gonna happen. It just is, because when two people believe in something, that's confirmation for the other person that it's possible, because someone else believes in you. And that's why it's
Yes.
also so important to surround yourself with like-minded people, because they are complementing your beliefs. And when someone complements your belief, it's more likely for that thing to come true. So I believe, and it's affirmed. We wrote it down. I'm gonna put the date on there, and it's gonna happen. Thank you so much for coming and sharing your book and these beautiful messages. What's the most important message that you want the audience to take away from your book?
I think it's important for everyone to know, if I had a stage that I could speak to the entire world in one moment, and I was given one line to say, I think it would be, you're a human being who's created in the image of God, and God blew the breath of life into you for your purpose, and that purpose is something that only you can do. God didn't breathe the breath of life into you to just be like everybody else.
Yeah.
You are unique, that you are important, that you are special, and go make something of that life, that godly spark that you were granted.
Yes. How can we just embrace that we are humans and responsible for the highest greatness that comes from us?
I mean, I think the way that you do that is you channel the spiritual mission into tangible action, and for the most part, humanity does that by living their life in a moral way. So if I take all of these spiritual gifts that I've been given, and you take these spiritual gifts that you've been given, and you channel it into the way in which you live your life. So, for example, you write, you sing, you whatever talents you've been granted and passions you've been given, channel that into making the world into a more settled place, into a more moral and good place. Then you've channeled your spiritual potential into actually affecting the world. So like the guy, I'm not a singer, but the guy who's a singer who can bring out the glory of God from singing, well, more power to him. I couldn't do that. Someone else couldn't do that. Many people can't do that. But I was given talents and abilities and passions and whatnot that I can be the conduit of expressing God in the world in my particular way. And when I do that, when I channel it into action and make my impact in my circle of influence, I'm being the conduit of the divine spirit that was given to me.
I love that. And I appreciate you sharing that because I wonder sometimes, do we see that our lives are an expression of the God in us? And what we do, people are looking at us as, especially if we are claiming that we are connected to God or the higher power. And then people are looking at us like, okay, so you did that. Where's the God in you?
Right.
So yeah, so is the God in us shining? I grew up with my grandmother part of my life. My parents, my mother left to go to America when I was 3 years old, and about 6 weeks later, my father died. So I grew up with my grandparents a part of my life, and I learned so much about the God in me from just watching
Hmm.
my grandmother. My grandmother thought that if we were given and kind, and that woman must have fed everybody in the neighborhood. She was so given, and always having, even if it's the smallest thing, she found ways to share it with a number of people. And I learned from her. At the time, I didn't understand it, but when I grew older and I reflect, I realized that my grandmother wanted her community to see the God in her by her exhibition of kindness and love. So thank you so much for coming and sharing and just reiterating that point, because I think it's important, especially today, as we look around and see how much is going on in the world, and that we need more expressions of individual love.
Absolutely. And thank you for having me today.
Well, don't go nowhere yet, because
I'm not going anywhere.
there are
Okay.
three questions that I love to ask all my guests. And number one is, what's one bold promise that you can share with the audience?
A bold promise. Oh boy. I think one bold promise that I can make is that as long as I have all of my faculties together, that I will always be a servant of helping people to find their mission in life, their purpose in life, their meaning in life.
That's beautiful. Thank you so much. What's a bold statement you can share with the audience that will cause a paradigm shift?
Um, it's not the problem, it's how you react to the problem. Um, what I mean by that is that when something happens to a person, the part that affects the person is not the problem itself, it's the problem that I have with the problem. And so when we shift our mindset of how we are viewing something, that changes the results on the inside. And so
Yes.
we don't let outside things control us when we have control over our insides.
Beautiful. I love that. I also think that what I'm hearing, it seems that you're saying, look look within, look deep within, because it's not what's coming from the person that you're having the problem with, or the thing that you're having the problem with, but start to look within and then look for solutions. Sometimes we look at problems, and you get more problems when you look at the problem over and over and over. But if you just look for solutions, you'll find solutions. If you look for solutions to your problem, you'll find solutions to your problem. Thank you.
True.
What's a bold move that you'd like to make in the future?
To give a TEDx talk.
So please come back when you've done your TEDx talk so we can tell the people that, you know what, you manifested it.
Sounds good to me.
Thank you so much for joining us, and for sharing your book, and for being so open and transparent and talking about The Beautiful Jewish Guide to the Mysterious. I can't wait to get my hands on a copy and to delve into it. And because I'm so big into um, the mysterious for dreams, reincarnation, all of it, really. I want to know more about what your faith says about reincarnation. Did you have a chapter that you just talk about
Yeah,
your faith and how it relates to what it has
sure.
to say about? Yeah. Okay.
Yep.
I'm looking forward to that chapter because I love to learn. I love to learn, and learning about different religions is one of the things that I appreciate. I feel stretched when I learn about another religion. I feel, not, I feel like I understand my own relationship with my spirituality when I look into and delve more into other people's religion. So I can't wait to read and get a copy. So
Great.
thank you so much. Where can we get your book?
Amazon.
Okay. Do you have a website also?
Yeah. My website in general is my name, pinchastaylor.com.
All right, guys, please get your copy. And when you do get your copy, read it and reflect on how the mysteries of life can really help you. You're more than just your five senses, there's so much more. And this is one of the books that will help you to reflect and dive into that. I appreciate you. And if you out there are listening, would like to write your own book, please send me an email at authordnicholson@gmail.com. I have created the publishing company that can help you get your book idea out of your head and onto paper so that you can become the published author that you've been dreaming of. And one day be here on the Bold Book of the Day, like Rabbi Pinchas Taylor.
Thank you for joining us for the Bold Book of the Day with Dr. Denise Nicholson, a central hub and a safe space for authors to share their stories. Follow Dr. Denise on Facebook and Instagram at Denise Nicholson or go to denisenicholson.com. Remember, no one can share your story better than you.